Hello everyone, welcome to the predicted record for Texas A&M football in 2024. Now the way we do this is I'm going to go through the probabilities, rounded to the nearest quarter, that your team is going to win each game with some analysis to go along with each of my picks. Obviously in real life, wins and losses are straight up 1-0 picks. You either win a game and it contributes to your win total or you don't. But in terms of prediction, I think it makes more sense to do that because sometimes you beat teams that are better than you and sometimes teams that are worse than you beat you. And so I don't think picking individual games is a smart idea this early. But I did want to get some insight into what roughly you can expect the record to be. The first game on the schedule is Notre Dame, which I have as a 0.5. This is a very interesting game, and I think the central player in this game is Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. He's a transfer quarterback they brought in. I think Notre Dame is doing this now where they just take, 1-year transfer quarterbacks and, let them play quarterback for the season. I don't know if it's smart to do that long term, but they're doing it again this year. They did it with Sam Hartman last year. And Riley Leonard is the most central player in this game to me because Mike Elko was previously his coach at Duke last year and the year before. And so you look at that and you say, okay, he was Elko's old quarterback. May that make it easier for Texas A&M to game plan in favor of him because Elko obviously is going to know Leonard's tendencies, and Elko is just a good fundamentals coach in general. He had a Duke program winning that had no business winning in year one especially. And so you look at this and you say, Mike Elko clearly knows what Riley Leonard is going to do. He knows his tendencies as a quarterback, and I think that makes it easy to game plan. Now, obviously, it's never quote-unquote easy, but you look at the utilization of A&M's talent, and I think Mike Elko can really shine at this because, he had a lesser program winning games that they had no business winning against more talented teams. And I think that was a previous issue with Jimbo Fisher, among other things. Jimbo could get the talent on campus, but he didn't know how to scheme it right, and he didn't really know how to build a cohesive culture, and he couldn't win with those guys. Just flat out, they were losing way more than they should, given the talent that they had. And so you bring in a coach like Mike Elko that is better fundamentally. I expect Texas A&M to be a better team than their record indicated they were the past couple of years, because Texas A&M has got a top 10, if not top 5 talent roster. I also think that atmosphere is going to play into this Notre Dame game. It's going to be a very tough environment for Notre Dame to walk in, especially week one. You've got over 100,000 people in there. It is going to be loud and it's going to be tough. And it might take Notre Dame a while to get used to things offensively. That's why I have this as a 0.5. And we move on to McNeese. McNeese is a 1. They're an FCS opponent. If you're losing to McNeese, it doesn't matter what I say. Texas A&M is clearly a lot worse than we thought they were if they're losing to teams like McNeese. Florida I have as a 0.5, and if you watch the Florida video, you know exactly why. I think the atmosphere is edge Florida, obviously, in this game because it's in Gainesville, but I also think that it gives them more likelihood to win this game. I think on a neutral field, this might be a 0.25 in favor of Florida because of just how much I respect the talent and the coaching that Texas A&M has. And Florida's still a talented team, but Texas A&M is just, they're above them in that respect. I think Mertz is a better quarterback than Weigman, and I think that he's proven that he is. Weigman might have more potential, but I think more of Mertz's potential has been realized. So we could get into the season and see, Weigman was actually supremely mishandled in his first 2 years. He's actually a lot better than what he showed. But as of right now, I think Mertz has shown that he can play better than Weigman in a tangible game, and that's what matters. And so, just given all of that and the questions on defense with Florida, it's still a 0.5 because Gainesville is a really hard place to play, and that's just how much I respect home crowd, especially in the college game. So, Texas A&M at Florida, that's a 0.5. Bowling Green, again, that's a 1. Texas A&M's a lot worse than we think they are if they're losing games like that. Arkansas in Dallas is a 0.75. Arkansas had offensive line issues, and that should never be a thing just considering that when Arkansas hired Sam Pittman, you hired a guy that was an offensive line coach And so you expect offensive line to be figured out the entire time he's there, and it just wasn't, just based on the pro-style approach that Dan Enos brought last year. I thought Dan Enos was a terrible hire, and I actually got into some arguments with some Arkansas folks over this, because Arkansas folks should have known because they had Dan Enos previously. And you're switching entirely what you're doing offensively from what Kendall Briles was doing previously. And so now you go to Bobby Petrino, Texas A&M's old offensive coordinator, and Arkansas's old head coach, and I don't know what that brings. I respect Bobby Petrino as an offensive mind. I think he does a good job. We'll see what happens at Arkansas. We'll see if all of their issues get resolved, especially in the close games, which this was actually not a close game last year. Arkansas could be a lot better just from, the luck going their way, because as bad as things were for Arkansas last year, they were in a lot of games that they just ended up on the wrong end of. They were 3 points away from beating LSU, 3 points away from beating Alabama. And Arkansas, I think, could be better than people think this year. But with that said, it's still at 0.75, even from like a talent gap perspective. With KJ Jefferson gone at quarterback, you really don't know what you're going to have at Arkansas until they lace it up and you find out, hey, we're good. Hey, we still have problems. But it requires a lot of assumptions to leap toward Arkansas is going to have a really good chance against a team like Texas A&M. Missouri I have as a 0.5. I think Missouri is a talented team. Not as talented as Texas A&M, but then you also consider scheme and coaching with Missouri. Got really good receivers, really good skill positions, and I think Missouri is on the up. I know they had a really good year last year, and you say, was that a fluke? Were they really lucky? I think they might actually probably have the opposite luck that Arkansas had last year in close games, where they were edging out a lot of teams, and some of that comes down to coaching, some of that comes down to luck, but Missouri is going to be in a lot of games this year. This is going to be one of them, even in College Station. I give this a 0.5. Not going to spend much time on at Mississippi State, but I do think it's a 0.75, even in Starkville. Mississippi State's got a lot to rebuild, and I believe in Jeff Lebby, but when you lose guys like Will Rogers, you lose some guys on offense. Defense wasn't great, even with a defensive-minded head coach last year. It's just a lot to take in for a first-year head coach and a first-time head coach. And so I don't know that Mississippi State's going to have a chance in a lot of games this year, especially against teams like Texas A&M that are going to be very talented, and you're going to have really fundamentally good play with a coach like Mike Elko. LSU I have as a 0.5. Both teams are very talented. Every team that we've gone through their schedule now has had LSU, so I do kind of feel like a broken record, but I am going to repeat the stat that I repeat in all those because I think it's very important, because I think the run game is going to be very important for LSU this year. From the standpoint of the last few years, really, they haven't gotten a lot of production out of running backs. Even toward the end of the Orgeron era, this was a problem. A lot of the running production last year came from Daniels, and that was an underrated aspect of why their offense was so good. And with Nussmeier, you don't really know that you have that. I think Nussmeier can be a good passer. I think he can be a great passer, actually. But running the ball is going to be, I think, LSU's biggest challenge on offense. I think they'll improve defensively because it's hard to be worse than what you had last year. But I'm going to repeat this stat that I repeated in the other two videos in the LSU games, and that LSU's top 3 running backs had an over 3 yard per carry drop-off from Jaden Daniels last year. They've got to find a way to replace the running production, or they're just not going to win many games. And just talent on talent, I think LSU and Texas A&M are close enough to even that it should be a competitive game. That's a 0.5. South Carolina is a 0.75 for me, even in Columbia, because this isn't even about like scheme or talent or any of that. Shane Beamer profiles as a motivator type coach, a guy that, maybe you don't have the talent to beat somebody, but he can get everybody fired up to go out there and win a football game, and he's done that before. He's he's won with less before in his first couple of years. And last year was a head-scratcher from that perspective because they just lost all the momentum they had in the first 2 years. I don't know what happened, but they just started losing games, and you look, they were competitive with Georgia. They had an 11-point lead over Georgia at halftime and didn't score in the second half last year. I don't know what South Carolina is. I really don't. From a psychological perspective, I don't know what happened to them. And they had a good quarterback last year. Spencer Rattler was a really good quarterback. Now the quarterback lineup is going to be Lenora Sellers with most likely Robbie Ashford backing him up. My man, Robbie Ashford. I think they're going to be good at quarterback. I like Lenora Sellers. But I have no idea from a psychological standpoint with lesser talent how they're going to match up with teams like Texas A&M. And so that's a 0.75 for me. Even if Columbia is a tough environment and an underrated one in the SEC, I just don't know that South Carolina's winning many games like this unless they get their mojo back. It's a weird way to phrase it, and South Carolina is really the only program that I would talk about like this because of how Shane Beamer is as a head coach. But that's the way I feel about it. New Mexico State is a 1. I shed a tear as I say that as an Auburn fan, but Texas A&M is better than we were last year. New Mexico State is in all likelihood worse than they were last year because like half their players transferred to Vanderbilt and their head coach. And speak of the devil, at Auburn is next. And Auburn's a team that is really upgraded at the skill positions. I think the Auburn game for Texas A&M might actually be the most interesting game on their schedule. Auburn has upgraded the skill positions on offense. Not quarterback, because they have the same quarterback as last year, but maybe in a sense they've upgraded. If Peyton Thorne improves, I think he can. And Hunter and Alston, very good running backs, and Cobb as well. And then you've got these 2 freshman receivers, Thompson and Coleman, that I think physically, even as freshmen, are ready to play at most places. And then you have Keandre Lambert-Smith and Robert Lewis, really good transfers at receiver. I think the offensive line is not going to be a liability like it might have been in years past. The real question for Auburn actually this year might be the defense. How do they generate a pass rush? And they've got a young secondary. I mean, aside from some standout players on defense like Scott and Asante, I'm not sure that Auburn really is that great defensively, and we might be disproven on that. I don't know. They have Texas A&M's old defensive coordinator, Durkin, on their staff. And as an Auburn fan, I wasn't particularly excited about the hire, but he's there. And so I think the home environment pushes this to a 0.5, even if I think Auburn is still rather inferior to Texas A&M. But I don't know where this is going to be on the schedule, but my feeling is Hugh Freeze has at least one game every year where he has his team just completely unprepared to play the game. And you don't know when it's going to show up, and it could be a team that you're expecting to beat. So maybe not Texas A&M, maybe an A&M loss would be more expected, but this is right before the Iron Bowl, and so, I could see, Auburn is going to lose a game they're expected to win this year at some point. It's going to happen. And you're not going to know when, you're not going to know who it is, but it's going to happen at some point. And so I think just knowing that, and then they're going to lose a couple of other games, I think this might be one of them, but just the environment itself and how hard it is for some teams to win at Auburn makes me think this is a 0.5. And here we have Texas. The crowd is going to be one of the craziest crowds you've ever seen, because Kyle Field is one of the largest stadiums in the United States, and they are going to be ready to play Texas, because both sides in this think the other side was in the wrong. Texas is mad at A&M for moving to the SEC. A&M is mad at Texas for being smug and trying to start their own TV network. And while all of this was going on, they were so mad at the other that they didn't want to play this game. Well, you're in the same conference now, so you got to play this game. And the A&M crowd is going to be looking for vengeance in this game. They're going to be willing Texas A&M to a win potentially in this game. And so it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough even for an experienced veteran guy like Quinn Ewers. Doesn't really matter how good you are. Tough environments are still tough. Doesn't mean you can't win, but they're still tough. I mean, they're better at quarterback. They're better at a lot of spots. But also, I think these teams are closer in talent than people realize. Just A&M hasn't put it together, and they hadn't won games to get to that point. So I have this as a 0.5, and maybe if it were in Austin, I might not, but I do think this is going to be a ruthless game. This is going to be one of the top games for rivalry week. Maybe even past the Iron Bowl and Michigan and Ohio State. And, Florida State, all of those rivalries. It might be past that in terms of intensity on the final week. So that's my prediction for all of these games. The total is 8-4, which some people make fun of Texas A&M by calling them Texas 8-4. Well, I'm predicting them to go 8-4 this year, which is a good year for Mike Elko's first year, and it's something they can build on because I think the potential with this program is a lot higher than the results people have seen in past years because Jimbo didn't know how to hire people that could tell him no, and he had a lot of confidence in himself that maybe he should not have had. And so the coaching with Texas A&M has not been good, and Mike Elko is a clear upgrade at head coach in my opinion. So, let me know what schools you guys want me to do. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.